All right, hello everyone. Mr. K here again. We're going to do something a little bit different than some of my past videos here. This is going to be a lot faster, and we're not using a PowerPoint or anything. I just don't think it's needed for what we're doing today. This is just a quick lesson on how to choose a wire size. All right, and you can see what's on the screen now. That may be overwhelming, so I'm going to cover it up with this. And we're just going to think about this for a minute. And you're thinking, well, what do you mean choose a wire size? Why do I need to do that? Let me use an example. If you are buying a set of off-road lights for your truck, you're going to put some off-road lights on the front bumper or up on the roof, and you're going to wire them up. And they don't come with wires. Okay, they're cheaper if you buy the kits with, or if you buy them without a kit, you just buy the lights. They don't come with wires. You need to figure out how big of a wire to use. If you use too small of a wire, what's going to happen? It's going to burn up, right? If you have a big headlight of any kind or a big load, electrical load on a small wire, it's going to burn the wire up. If it's too large of a wire, it'll work great, but you're wasting money. 100-foot roll, most wires you buy in 100-foot rolls if you do any amount of this type of stuff. 100-foot roll of, let's say, maybe 14 gauge wire, which is probably about what you would typically use for a light like that. 100-foot roll, that's probably maybe $9 to $15. 100-foot roll of 6 gauge wire might be $400. So one of the students in one of my classes said, well, I just use 10 gauge wire for everything. That way I know it's enough. I always know it's enough. 10 gauge wire for lights, 10 gauge wire for my radio, 10 gauge wire for this, for that. That's one approach, I suppose, but he's wasting a lot of money doing that. And not to mention, if you do it on a race car or an airplane or anything like that, it's extra weight, and it's pointless weight. Why would you add extra copper if you don't need that? If you're working on a Corvette or something like that, and you're putting any kind of aftermarket system in there, you don't want that extra weight. That might be a track car. That may be something that you race with. So anyway, so the point is we need to figure out what kind of wire do we actually need. What size wire do we need? Because we don't want to go bigger than we have to. Okay, extra money, extra weight. We're going to avoid that. So choosing a wire size. Here's how we do it. First, we need to know the voltage. Well, that should be an easy one, right? Voltage of any car battery. ASC test question right here, 12.6 volts. I'm going to turn that underlining off. 12.6 volts for a car battery, right? And when it's running in a car, it's more like about running equals about 14 volts. Why is that? Hopefully you're thinking because the alternator is spinning and the engine is, the alternator is actually putting power back into the battery while the car is running and taking that power away for some of the components and lighting and blower motor and things like that. So vehicle's running about 14 volts, okay? You also need to know how many amps your item uses. So how do we find out how many amps something uses, whether it be a light bar or a radio or a horn or whatever it may be? There's a few ways. So I'm going to say amps question mark. One, you can look at the box. Okay. If you buy something new, a lot of times you can look at the box and it'll just tell you, if you buy an off-road light, it'll just say 12 volts, 6 amps. Well, if you're wiring up 2 of them, 12 volts, 12 amps, right? So anyway, just think about that. One way is with look at the box. Okay. Another way is, if you're really going to get fancy, you can use an ohm meter. We talked about that in class. We're not going to get into it in this video, but you can use an ohm meter. You can measure the resistance, then you can calculate how many amps it's going to use. And another way is go ahead and turn the light bar on, hook it up to a battery just to test it, turn item on, and use clamp meter, ammeter. Okay, clamp meter, ammeter is another way to find out how many amps or how much electrical load that item uses. Okay, so there's 3 ways. Oh, there's probably more than that. That's kind of all that comes to mind right now. Okay, so you need to know the voltage, 14. We're going to say 14 while the vehicle's running. We need to know the amps that it uses, and here's 3 ways to do that. And we need to know the wire length that you're going to need. So think about this. If you're wiring up a light bar on the roof, you're going to have to go from the battery to a switch on the dashboard, and then out of that switch up to the light bar. Now, if you don't do a great job of wire routing, you just take the shortest path and you run it right through the engine compartment, and you don't run it along other wire bundles or put it in clips real nice or anything, you might get away with about 10 feet of wire to do that. I'm going to say realistically, if you actually wire it nicely and you put it in wire bundles that are already there in the car, you zip tie it, you clip it where it should be clipped, you're probably looking, I'm going to say about 18 feet of wire. Okay. So wire length, 18 feet. All right. That's all we need to know for finding out how large diameter wire we need. Let's make up a number for amps. I'm going to say the typical light bar. Oh, if it's, most of you guys are running LEDs now, so that's going to be a lot. That's going to be low. Someone in class said they just put a 6 amp LED light bar on their truck, and it's pretty bright. So 6 amps. So this is what we're using: 14 volts, 6 amps, and 18 feet long. Only have one other thing to show you, and it is this chart. Okay, it looks like a lot. Don't let it overwhelm you. First thing we need to do, figure out your voltage. Let's start right up here at the top every time. Top left, every time. Just start here. What voltage are we at? Remember, 14. Then you start going down. This is wire length in feet. So we're at 14. We're going to start dropping down. Remember, we said we needed an 18-foot wire. Let's find 18. Okay, there's no 18 here. It's only 15 and 20. You always default to the larger one to be safe. So let's say 20 feet. So look again, 14 volts, drop down, 20 feet of wire. Now, how many amps did we say? We said 6 amps. Then you start traveling to the right until you hit the 6 amp line. Boom, that's the 6 amp line right there. See this diagonal line? It goes up and it says 6 amperes. Okay, so let's do that again. 14 volts, down, down, down to 18 feet. Then we go up to the nearest one to make it safe, which is 20. Go over to 6 amps, over, boom. We've hit the 6 amp line right here. Now, last step, you look down. Down, 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 down. Okay. We're right between a 16 gauge wire and a 14 gauge wire. So what do? You always play it safe. You always go to the bigger one. So 14 gauge wire is what we need. Okay. Now, this is the same guy that said we need to just use 10 gauge wire for everything. Okay. 10 gauge wire. Look how many sizes we've skipped. We only need a 14 and he's going to use 10. That's a big waste of money. Okay. In fact, just to finish off this presentation here, let's go, and you can't see this right now, I'm on a different screen, but I'm going to do 14 gauge wire, 100-foot roll. And I'm coming up with a lot of Home Depot stuff. So let's see what we got at Home Depot. Okay. This is speaker wire, so it's not exactly, but I'm just going to use this as a quick example. 14 gauge, 100 feet, 30 bucks. Okay, let's go with 10 gauge wire. So remember, $30 for 14. Let's go with the 10 gauge, see what we get. 100 feet, stranded 10 gauge wire, $35. That is nowhere near as big of a jump as I thought it would be. So 10 gauge wire, 35 bucks. We're back to 30, okay. So it's more expensive, nowhere near the jump that I expected. It probably has to do with the fact that copper is quite cheap right now compared to in previous years. Scrap prices are down. But anyway, you're still wasting money, and it's extra space under the hood that you don't need to be taken up. It's extra weight. Okay, so we always want the smallest wire. Let's do one more example. Again, 14-volt system. Let's say 20 amp this time, 20 amp light bar. Okay, so 14 volts. Okay, boom, how many feet long is the wire? Well, we know that because we've measured it, right? When you were installing it, you should have measured it. Okay, 14 volts down to 18. Remember, there's no 18, so we're going to go 20 feet and then over to a 20 amp. 20 amp, 20 amp, 20, 20, boom, there you are. 20 amp. Now we go down. Okay, it's right between 12 and a 10, so it defaults to 10. Always go bigger, go safer. So there's where we need a 10 gauge wire. If we're running a 20 amp light bar with an 18-foot long wire on a 14-volt system, that's where we need the 10 gauge wire. Okay. Notice, last thing, I have not talked about these curves yet. This next part's not going to be on your test. But if you take level 2, it will be. So listen up. Okay. Curve 1. Notice this says amps wire in conduit and bundles. Curve 2, notice it says single wire in free air. Notice curve 1, if you follow curve 1, it's higher. What curve 1 is going to do, and here let's use an example that forces us. Let's go again, 14 volts, 20 feet long, 20-foot long wire, but this time we have a 70 amp load on it. Okay, we go over, remember 14, 20, we go over, we're looking for 70, looking for the 70 line, boom, we haven't hit it yet, but we hit this curve. If this wire is in a bundle of wires, it's going to heat up more because it's insulated by other wires. So we need to then follow this curve up to 70. Let's see, 70's right there, boom. Go down, we need a 4-gauge wire. What if this curve wasn't here? 14 volts, 20 feet long, going to 70, ignoring the curve, going to 70, let's see, boom. Still comes out to a 4-gauge wire in this case. Okay, but a lot of times that curve, because that wire is in a bundle, that curve will bump you up to the next wire size. Remember, a hot wire does not conduct electricity as well as a cold wire. That's why we have that happen. Okay. All right, one last example, and then that'll be the end of the video. So again, what do you need to know for the test, especially if you're just in level 1? 14 volts. You know, we know the voltage, right? Let's try one more. Let's say let's see if we can find one 50 feet long. Let's do that. 14 volts, 50-foot long wire. So you're wiring up something on a semi-truck, semi-trailer. It's a long wire. And it's going to use, let's go with 10 amps. Okay, so 14, 50 feet long and 10 amps. Going over on the line until we hit 10. Still going, still going, still going. Boom, we hit 10. We look down. It's between 10 and an 8. You always go on the safe side, so that needs an 8-gauge wire. Okay, that's a big wire, by the way. Some battery cables, starter wires on smaller cars are 8-gauge wire. Okay, that's it. Hope you enjoyed the video and use this to complete your assignment.